Here we go. A jury throws the book at a former FLDS bigwig for bigamy. What does it mean for underage girls who are forced to marry and have sex with grown men? But first, is a police videotape the key in the killing of Trayvon Martin, or does it raise more questions than it answers? And we're going to get into here this evening, but I got some weird, feel like this is a very important story. Me, Nancy, they were all attacking the story all day long. I happen to agree with Nancy that there's a lot to care about. That this is a story that has shown us something about ourselves, and I'm trying to elevate that conversation a bit. Now, of course, we're going to get into the details of what happened at that tragic incident. Here to discuss all this, first of all, I have the O.J. Simpson prosecutor and author of the book Guilt by Association, Marcia Clark, also criminal defense attorney Mark Garagos, and the attorney for Trayvon's family, Natalie Jackson. So, guys, first of all, I want to ask you guys something. You had just reviewed an Anderson Cooper interview with an eyewitness at the scene. Is that right?
That's correct. Right.
And what were your thoughts? I haven't seen this yet. What did you guys witness?
I don't want to speak for Marcia, but I think we both probably agree that it raises some real questions because I don't think, at least in watching the interview when I did, that it's determined at this point whether it was on top or not on top when the shot went off.
What did this guy say?
What he said was so starting. It was very dark, so he couldn't see exactly who was on top and who was on the bottom. But he did hear someone cry out for help. He did them struggling. It was important that he stated it was on the grass portion, not on the sidewalk where the concrete was. That's important in terms of how injuries might have been suffered by George Zimmerman and his claim about having had his head banged on the pavement.
That's somewhat consistent with the police report that he had grass on his back. We had another police report.
Right, grass on his back and it was wet.
But that could have just been them rolling around struggling. It doesn't necessarily mean he punched him and he landed on his back.
Right.
Not at all. And in fact, didn't he say they were struggling?
Right.
They were
he did say they were definitely. It was definitely a struggle, and I think to some degree the witness helps Zimmerman's position in a kind of unusual way. But even more so, the fact, and maybe we'll agree again, that would be a first.
That would be crazy.
That this has got to be a prosecution's worst nightmare to have their witnesses being interviewed on TV, even if they're disguised, because it gives so much more fodder to the defense to get in there. You've now got yet another statement that you can play around with.
It's true. That is a problem. But I do think that his statement actually helps the prosecution more, because what this witness said is that there was nothing about the scuffle he saw or the manner in which George Zimmerman moved afterwards, after the shots were fired, that was consistent with someone who'd been beaten as severely as he claimed to have been.
Who felt their life was in danger,
correct.
Right?
Correct.
So is there specifics to what he was saying about what he saw, how he moved?
Yes. What he said was after the struggle, there were screams. He heard the screams. There was a struggle. One was on top. One was on top. He said more than one shot. That's incredibly important.
Did say
wow.
It could have been an echo.
Yeah.
And that may be because he's already been influenced by having heard the media reports that there was only one shot. Who knows? And he was a very savvy. This was not this was a very intelligent witness in the sense that he cautioned. He was very cautious. He didn't seem to be embellishing. At least I didn't have the sense.
I agree. And I think he's going to be a compelling witness because he does feel very down the middle. He felt like he was being very careful to be precise and not stretch out there. But he did say, I heard the shot. So he said plural at the time.
But was somebody walking away when shots were fired?
No, and then
during the struggle.
And then
somebody got up.
Yes, and the person who got up was George Zimmerman. He got up very shortly after the shots were fired. He was moving with no trouble.
Okay.
He touched his forehead. There was nothing that, in other words, seems to corroborate the statement by George Zimmerman that he was beaten so severely.
Natalie, what do you make of all this?
You know, it goes back to what the parents have always wanted in this case. There needs to be an arrest so that a jury can see this, and a jury can evaluate these witnesses and the credibility of these witnesses. We keep getting into the what happens, but the what happened is a question for a jury or a judge to decide. But we can't get to that question without an arrest in this case. The parents want to know. The bottom line is the parents want to know, and they want someone to say, our innocent child murdered. It's not just that it's self-defense and walk away, nothing.
And Mark, you said something I thought that caught my attention last night, which was that you've never really seen a case where there was not arrest, then questions as to the police officer involved in the shooting.
The police shooting, the only time that you have a dead body and somebody who's there, and there's no question that he's the one that pulled the trigger.
And by the way, on the police report, they have it as manslaughter or homicide. I mean,
Right.
they report it as such.
So I really think that's what drives all of this, because everybody's experience who's ever had any connection with the criminal justice system knows that generally, in my experience at least, there's always going to be an arrest. And then the prosecutor will make the decision later on. Now, we've heard today, at least, that they phoned a prosecutor in or something to that effect. That also is incomprehensible to me, at least on that night. Usually here in L.A., I will tell you, they'll let somebody move their heels for 48 to 72 hours. They'll bring all the reports to the prosecution. The prosecution will make a decision, and then something is done later on. There's even a news report today out of Pasadena where somebody called 911, said the guy had a gun. Pasadena police killed the person. He didn't have a gun.
Driving.
Right. And they went and arrested the 911 caller. So that's how we operate here in California.
Wow.
That's bizarre.
Let's be fair, it's Pasadena. It's where we live, Mark. It's where you and I live.
Where we live, so I understand that.
But do you agree with what Mark's saying?
Yes, it's true. I mean, you do expect an arrest. There was an arrest. I mean, that's the thing that we were all, I think, misinformed about initially, is that we all thought the police did nothing. They sat on their hands, let this guy go home, did no statements taking, didn't do the normal things. They did do it.
How many people said,
they did do it.
I mean, it was almost reported as kind of urban fact and legend that he was not arrested. That's when the tape comes out, I said, wow, what are we talking about here? Everybody's so misinformed that it's out there that he wasn't arrested.
And he was absolutely arrested. He was arrested. He was handcuffed. He was transported to the station. And the lead investigator took the case to the DA and asked to file it.
That night?
That night.
That night.
So,
and the DA turned it down, or
they call them the state's attorneys there, and at least what's being reported, and because there's been so much misinformation, I don't want to create any more. But at least what's being reported is that the state's attorney said no, we need further investigation. I don't have an objection to that. As a defense lawyer, I love that. I want them to do more investigation, but you know, it's a problem because it's so opposite of what most people's experience is.
And Natalie, as the family's attorney, I bet you see it.
I kind of disagree. I do, because what you're talking about is a legal definition of arrest. There was not an arrest made, meaning that he was not booked, he was not made to bail out. His ability to carry a weapon was not revoked. His ability to leave the state was not revoked. In this case, legally there may have been an arrest, but what people know as an arrest did not happen. George Zimmerman is a free man. He can go and get another gun. He can leave the country if he wants. He can do whatever he wants right now. He does not have to face a jury.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They didn't file a case against him, but there's no question that he was arrested under the legal definition of what an arrest was, which is totally different than what was initially being reported.
And then he was let go quickly thereafter.
Right, and whether he was booked or whether he had anything revoked or whether a jury's going to hear it, those are decisions that are still going to come. If the state's attorney says they're going to file charges, he'll be rearrested, he will be booked, he will then have bail set, and he will not be able to carry a firearm during the pendency.
And as I understand right now, they have to beat a grand jury.
Right, those are decisions that will come. Those are decisions that will come because of the public outcry. The parents were told this case was done. It's self-defense, we cannot arrest. That's what the parents were told when they found out that their 17-year-old son was killed by someone and he was doing nothing wrong. No parent wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that about their child. And without the public outcry, this would have never happened. A special prosecutor would have never been assigned. Neither would have been a grand jury have been convened on April 10th.
Yep. Natalie, I think you're right. I think that is that's what catapulted this thing into everyone's consciousness. That is what's so scary about this case, and that's why we're still here digging into it tonight. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Mark. And Natalie, thank you. Next up, you're going to hear George Zimmerman's father, Robert Zimmerman, a judge, defend his son publicly for the first time since the shooting.